Another phase of the MCU is officially behind us. Hey guys, Caleb here from CDBS Studios, and a couple weeks ago, the MCU just released its last project in Phase 5 of the MCU, that being Ironheart. And with now Phase 5 officially behind us and Phase 6 starting next week, the Fantastic Four, the first steps, I thought it was a perfect time to stop and rank all 15 projects that came out during Phase 5, and then at the end, I'm going to give my thoughts on the phase overall and kind of just give my overall review of Phase 5. But for right now, let's get into my overall ranking list of all 15 Phase 5 MCU projects. At number 15, at the very bottom of our list, is honestly not even a competition. Secret Invasion has gotta be one of the worst MCU projects that's come out over the course of the whole show, of the whole series, and this show is just the pinnacle of just bad Disney Plus shows. I just genuinely want to know who in their right minds over at Marvel looked at this comic book series called Secret Invasion, one of the most influential and famous things that the Marvel comics ever did, and looked at it and said, I think we should downscale this story into a Nick Fury spy espionage Disney Plus limited series and then stick it there and then basically move on. I just want to know whose idea that was, because it is honestly one of the worst decisions they ever made when adapting any of these books. Because if you've ever read the Secret Invasion comics, you know Secret Invasion is an Avengers story. The whole premise of Secret Invasion is that the Skrulls have come down to Earth and have replaced certain people with Skrulls, and it's basically like this whole big reveal thing of, for the last couple of comic books, you might have noticed this character acting weird. Oh yeah, it was actually a Skrull the whole time. It makes sense. But then this show is basically just like, okay, Nick Fury's the only one who can deal with the Skrulls. I'm not even going to bat my eye at how stupid that idea is. And then their whole premise of, our characters that have been switched. It's Martin Freeman's Agent Ross from the Black Panther movies, but he only is replaced in one scene in the cold open of episode 1, and then we don't see him again until we save the actual Ross in the finale. And then the most hated part of this whole series is what they do to Rhodey, because now the fan base of the MCU cannot decide when in the franchise Rhodey was switched, because no matter where you say it got switched, someone's gonna argue with you, which just means it's like, that just shows that you did a bad job. If you wanted to do this whole story of, Ross was replaced by a Skrull, Rhodey was replaced by a Skrull, you gotta tell us when it happens, because right now it's just this whole basic thing of, when did Rhodey get switched? This little line that the director said seems to imply it was here, but then the clothes he's wearing say this, but then the actual lore of the show says this. Like, I think this show could have been so much better if it was an Avengers movie, because think about what they could do is they set up like a whole phase-long story of you could do a whole saga on Secret Invasion, but like if you just did a phase-long story of over the course of some movies, there's certain characters that are either acting different or acting off, then you could reveal in an Avengers movie that they were Skrulls and the Avengers team up to take them on. Why is it Nick Fury? And then the other big issue I have with the show is that, honestly, I was liking big portions of it in certain episodes, but the finale completely ruins it. As one of the big problems people keep complaining about in the MCU, which sometimes comes up, is mainly, the example I'm going to use is Captain Marvel. The reason why people didn't like Captain Marvel is that she is such a powerful character, and like superpowers wise, where she can basically beat any single villain who opposes her. So her whole character is basically around like either she has to be depowered somehow, or she can't show up in the story until after the character is like after the character's too powerful to where she can't do anything about it. Because the first Captain Marvel ends with a very anticlimactic fight. Avengers Endgame, she's missing from the whole movie until Thanos has the Infinity Stones and she can't just one-shot him. And then she sits back and does nothing for the whole entirety of the Marvels until the main villain has all the power to where she can't beat him in 1 second. So explain something to me, Marvel. Why did you then put Emilia Clarke in the show just for in the finale to give her the powers of every single other character in the MCU? Because in the finale, she becomes a Super Skrull that has the powers of every single other character in the entire MCU. And then the whole finale fight battle is her versus the main villain, and who also has these powers, and they're constantly shifting between looking like other MCU characters with the most atrocious CGI I've ever seen in my entire life. Man, I did not think I was going to get this mad about talking about Secret Invasion. It's just, these are some complaints I've had to hold in for a very long time, and I didn't expect to get them out. Bottom line is, Secret Invasion was an awful idea that was executed so poorly that it makes me long for the days of things like Incredible Hulk and Thor: The Dark World. So, honestly, this is the worst phase that released in this phase. This is the worst project that released in this phase, and honestly, maybe one of the worst projects in the entire MCU. Like, this project frustrates me on an internal level, I swear. At number 14, I have What If Season 2. Let's just get this off right away. Iron Fist Season 2 was a more worthwhile addition to the Iron Fist series than What If Season 2 was to the What If series. Between the two of them, I'd take Iron Fist Season 2 in a heartbeat. And keep that in mind, because in my Defenders video, I said I didn't even like Iron Fist Season 2 that much. What If Season 2 is so frustrating because I was originally one of the biggest defenders of What If, as I actually thought the first season was pretty decent. I actually really liked how they did a lot of interesting one-off stories about alternate universes, and then eventually brought them together in the end as like to have somewhat of a finale where all of the main characters from the episodes team up to fight a big bad. This season, however, goes completely off the rails with showing concepts or showing episodes that I never even wanted to see. Like, why are there full episodes in here that are things like Captain Carter basically just recreating the Winter Soldier? We have an episode set on Christmas that's just a huge Die Hard parody with Happy Hogan. Then we have a full-on 1602 episode, which I was probably the most excited for out of the whole series. But then they just used it as another vehicle to promote Captain Carter. And then you even have episodes in here like Kahori's episode. Why are you telling an original story in What If? That's not the point of What If. And then the finale is just, again, destroys everything. Like, I'll stand by this, that I think the finale of the first season of What If is probably one of my favorite episodes of that season because it does the crossover so well. But instead, this time, it's let's destroy the corrupt Doctor, the Supreme Strength. Let's destroy his entire character by making him an unapologetic villain and have Captain Carter and Kahori team up to go after him. But then in the finale, Captain Carter's just going to get all these extra powers through the Infinity Stones and Hela's crown and stuff to make her so powerful to go after Strange. Why? I've constantly gone on the record to say this, but there's only one episode in this entire season that I think is good or on par with the original season. And that is episode 2, the one where Peter Quill comes down to Earth and the Avengers form in the 1980s with characters like Marvel, Hank Pym as Ant-Man, Goliath, all those characters. That's the only episode in this entire season that I like and I think is good. Season 2 is the downfall of where What If starts, where the show, instead of trying to be what it was originally supposed to be, which is showing us the multiverse of the MCU, where we do spins on the classic MCU stories, and instead it's just, here's you guys liked Captain Carter, right? Here's 5 episodes this season that basically center around her. That's not the point of What If. At that point, just make a Captain Carter show. What are you doing, Marvel? In the end, this show is at least better than Secret Invasion, because while I don't like a ton of the episodes this season, I at least enjoy a decent amount of them, and they don't make me physically angry like Secret Invasion does, so that's really the only reason it beats Secret Invasion. So, What If Season 2 is fine. It's not the worst, but it definitely could have been a whole lot better. At number 13, I have Echo. Yeah, did anybody else forget that Echo came out? I was actually going through this list to make it, and I was writing down all the projects to like phase 5 projects to put in the ranking list to figure them out. And I'm scrolling through the list and I saw Echo. And honestly, I completely forgot that Echo even happened. I had to go rewatch it just to remember what even happened because this show just kind of blipped. Because I think it mainly came down to last year in 2024, Marvel only released 5 projects, and every single one of them is better, or either better or more memorable than Echo was. To me, Echo is a huge just red X mark that basically shows that the MCU doesn't need a project based on soloing every single character they've ever created, because this show is just boring for most of it. I mean, I liked Echo in Hawkeye. I thought she served as a really cool antagonist to Clint, and I think she had a really cool story in that show, especially with the whole Kingpin stuff they did. But then this show feels like they're trying to not only push Echo as a character, but also they're also trying to recapture the magic of the Defender saga, as there's a huge portion of this season when I was watching it where I really felt like, wait, why am I not just watching Daredevil? Because that's the vibes I got from this show. But it's just so boring. Is one of the huge things that keeps always dragging us down is that I think Marvel's forgotten why Kingpin works so well in those shows. Because the reason Kingpin is such a good villain in Daredevil and all the Defender Saga shows is they take time to build him up. He's not just a character that shows up for one episode of a show as a huge big bad to reveal he's been running all these little things in the show. Daredevil seasons 1 and 3 work so well because Kingpin's a part of the story from the first episode, and you slowly build up his antagonistic nature until you get to that final confrontation between him and the main character. That's why he works. But then you got this show where he's basically got no more than like maybe 5 minutes of screen time across the entire series until the finale, which centers around him. And the finale is less about trying to impact Echo's story, but more just a vehicle to tease Kingpin's eventual showcase in Daredevil Born Again. So, what's the point of Echo? To be honest, at this point, I don't even want to see Echo in any more Avengers movies, because if this is how boring she became after Hawkeye, I doubt that she's ever going to get good enough to be in an Avengers movie or even get another season of Echo. Like, there's definitely, I will admit, there are things about Echo I like. I like a lot of the side characters of like Maya's family. I think they're really interesting characters. And when he is on screen, Kingpin is one of the best parts of this show. I do just like Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin. And I do like some of the realistic takes the show tries to go with portraying the like deaf community in that. But overall, Echo is just kind of a blip in the MCU where it feels like it just came and went, and everyone, including myself, forgot about it. And maybe that's for the best, but that's kind of where I got to put Echo, is right here, because it has definitely moments. I definitely like more about Echo than I do about What If Season 2 and Secret Invasion. But honestly, Secret Invasion and What If Season 2, I remember those shows because of how much I hate them. Echo just kind of lives in this blip quality in my mind where basically like I only remember Echo even happened when I'm really thinking about Echo happening, which doesn't happen a ton, because especially in the wider MCU like timeline and story arc, Echo doesn't really factor in anything, as the show does nothing with the multiverse, and Echo doesn't really have any connections with anything that's probably going to come up again in the multiverse saga, because like Clint is probably not going to show up again. Kate Bishop, doesn't really have much of a relationship with Maya to begin with, and Kingpin's off doing his thing with Daredevil, so where's Echo ever going to have a chance to show up again? So, yeah, maybe this show being forgettable is for the best, because it means that, unlike Secret Invasion, we're not going to be arguing about why Maya hasn't showed up in like 5 years later when the MCU is renewing a bunch of its new shows. So, sorry, Echo. At number 12, I have Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Now, this movie definitely has had one of the biggest fall-offs for me in recent months, as some of you might remember is I've talked about this movie in the past on my channel, and I've admitted I actually kind of liked this movie the first time I saw it, as I thought it was a really fun adventure through the quantum realm. It had some nice things, and I did really enjoy Kang in this movie. But this movie in recent months, I rewatched it for this video, and it got so much worse for me on rewatch. As one of the big things that I think that degraded this movie for me is it's just not that funny to me anymore. As before I watched Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, I actually was doing an Ant-Man rewatch with a couple of my friends, and we watched all three Ant-Man movies, and even though we knew all the jokes and comedic bits of Ant-Man and Ant-Man and the Wasp, we still laughed at a ton of them. Like Luis's stories, a bunch of the running gags in those original two Ant-Man movies, the magic stuff in Ant-Man and the Wasp. We still laughed at that stuff. And I was really enjoying those two movies. And then I get into Quantumania. I don't think I laughed once on this rewatch. Like, there's so many bits in this movie that I just didn't find funny on a second time around. The holes bit, the bit with Bill Murray, even some of the comedic bits that like Ant-Man gets, like they're just not funny in this movie. So I'm just really bored. And I think the other thing that kind of downgraded this movie a huge bit is, especially after rewatching close to the other Ant-Man movies, the characters in this movie don't feel the same. Like, the way Scott, Hope, Hank, and Janet act in this movie feels like they're completely different characters from the last time we saw them, which was Endgame. So, this just feels like you could just get a sense that some of these actors just don't want to be doing this anymore, and especially now that a bunch of them have retired from acting, it kind of becomes apparent that maybe they just didn't want to be doing this movie anymore. And it makes for the movie being a little meh. The only real character in this movie that I really do enjoy is Cassie. Catherine Newton is playing this character with such malice, and I really love her arc over the film as she becomes this leader character, and I just love her in this movie. I think she's doing a really good job, and it actually is nice to get an expansion of her role after she was kind of underutilized in the other Ant-Man movies. But the final thing that I think really downgraded this movie is that now, in 2025, now that we've all started looking forward, especially after Phase 5, now we're looking forward to Secret Wars and Doomsday, is that this movie in particular feels unnecessary. Like, before, one of the reasons I argued for this movie so heavily in the past is because Kang was supposed to be the main villain of the multiverse saga. So him showing up in this project, I always said was necessary because you get a chance to build up Kang as a character or as a villain, and then we get into Kang Dynasty where he's going to be the main threat. And it made sense to have him show up in like Ant-Man because then Ant-Man could serve the Bruce Banner role like of Infinity War where he warns the other heroes of Kang's existence. But now that it's Doctor Doom as the main villain, Kang, what is the point of Kang anymore? Like, especially with this movie having a whole post-credit scene setting up the Council of Kangs, there's no point to that anymore. So this movie has downgraded itself because I liked it originally as a Kang origin story, but now it's just a boring showcase of maybe the things Kang could do, but that he's never going to get to do. So this movie downgraded. So yeah, basically rewatching this movie felt like a huge downgrade from where I originally thought it was. And keep in mind, when I first saw this movie, I put it at like a 6 or 7 out of 10. Like, I really liked it. And over recent, especially these last couple months, I've now dropped it to like a 4 out of 10. I don't like this movie anymore. So this is not just coming from someone who hates on the MCU now. It's just coming from someone who liked a movie but rewatched it and found it wasn't that good. So sorry to Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, but I just think I gotta put you lower on the list because you just don't feel like I don't think you're a good movie anymore. And I don't think you have any of that necessary wow factor that other movies have. Like, keep in mind, even in the Infinity Saga, movies that felt like they were very light and didn't have a ton of stuff like that was necessary still felt necessary to the Infinity Saga story. Either they would introduce an Infinity Stone like Thor the Dark World, or they would introduce aspects of a character that would carry on to other movies, like Tony Stark and his PTSD and his removing of the arc reactor in Iron Man 3. Two movies, keep in mind, I don't like those two movies fully, but I still think they're necessary to the overall MCU. So, I think I just have to put Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania lower on the list because I just can't see it as a good movie anymore, unfortunately. Sorry. At number 11, I have The Marvels, and this is a very interesting movie to talk about as it's another movie where I don't fully see the point of it. Now, it's a sequel to billion-dollar hit Captain Marvel that carries on Carol Danvers' story and brings in Kamala Khan and Monica Rambeau as kind of this group of heroes that take on Dar-Ben, one of the Kree, and it's this lighthearted comedy kind of movie. And I think one of the big issues I feel with this movie is that it feels like a TV movie. Like, it feels like something like the Disney Channel would make and then stick on their TV or stick it straight on Disney Plus. And mainly that problem mainly originates from Kamala Khan being one of the main characters of this movie, because Kamala Khan was introduced as a TV character in a TV show. And so you can't really get the full extent of that character in the movie because she was written as a TV character, so they don't want to change that aspect or writing style for her. So it feels off. And that's just kind of makes this movie feel like a TV thing. And I think that hurts the movie overall. The comedy is kind of all over the place in this movie and is all over the place in this movie, and it also just feels like it's very uninspired. The main villain, Dar-Ben, has basically no presence in the movie at all. Like, even when she's on screen, I don't feel anything by her. Like, I'm not threatened by her. She doesn't have an interesting backstory to, like, motivate her. Her whole motivation is just after Carol Danvers in the first movie was basically abused by the Supreme Intelligence, she went back to Hala to destroy the Supreme Intelligence. So Dar-Ben is now mad because Carol Danvers fought back against them and destroyed the Supreme Intelligence, which is like, all right, I get, like, you guys were bad people. Like, I don't have any remorse for what you did. Like, this movie, it's definitely got good moments in it. Kamala Khan is, for how much I just ripped on her, like, making this movie feel like a TV movie, she honestly is the best part of it. She's the only thing in this movie that I really did truly, really enjoy. And I did like some of the fight sequences, and there are definitely some good banter that happened between Monica, Carol, and Kamala. But overall, this movie's all over the place tonally, and it makes it to where I'm like, what was even the point of this movie? Like, at this point, is honestly, I would have just preferred it if you just made Miss Marvel season 2 and then did some story that, like, is just like a team up between the three of them, but do it on the TV side so that it doesn't feel like a weird stitched together movie. I don't know. Yeah, this movie's fine. Let's just move on. Bringing us into the top 10, I have What If Season 3. This season was a lot better for me than the second season. It's definitely still not as good as the first season for me, but it definitely does a lot more things right. First off, it does actually tell some stories that I do think are good, that I did like to see. Like, my favorite episode this season was the Agatha Harkness episode. In fact, if you want to hear my thoughts on all of the episodes, I did a whole review of What If Season 3 when it came out on my channel that you can go check out, where I also ranked all the episodes, so you can see my excited thoughts there. But there were definitely a lot more episodes this season that I did really enjoy, and I did think that there definitely was some better overall storytelling, but at the same time, it's still just the downgrade of What If. Like, they're telling a lot more cool, interesting stories, which I do prefer to just telling a bunch of random dumb stories that I never had the interest in seeing. But then at the same time, like usual, they try to bring it all together in the end, and it basically just becomes, let's promote Captain Carter, and you know you did something bad when you kill off Captain Carter in your show and I'm cheering for it. Like, you know you did bad when that's the response you get out of me. Yeah, I don't have a ton more to say about this season that I didn't already say back in my initial review. So if you want to hear my extended thoughts, go watch that video. But overall, What If Season 3 is an improvement on Season 2, nowhere near the heights of Season 1, and it kind of sits like perfectly in the middle of our list. It's like a perfectly average project that came out of Phase 5. At number 9, I have our most recent MCU project, Ironheart. Now, I have very conflicting feelings about Ironheart as a whole. First off, this show has some of the most infamous production behind the scenes drama that I've ever seen on an MCU project, because if you didn't know, they shot this project 2 years ago. Pretty much almost right after Wakanda Forever came out, they shot this. And they've been sitting on it for 2 years now, until 2025 where they finally released it. And it just gives me a sense that they weren't confident enough in this show, so they held it on the back burner, and now it feels like they're just kind of releasing it to get it out of the way. So, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that information. I definitely think that this show definitely is split into some various things. Of course, they also did this weird release schedule where they released 3 episodes one week, and then the next week they released the other 3 episodes. So they didn't do like the whole 6-week expansion build up. It was, let's do 2 weeks, release 3 episodes, then release the next 3 episodes. And the episode quality is definitely very low. The first 3 episodes that were released I thought were fine, but they definitely didn't do anything major that I liked. And then in the back half, episode 4 is my least favorite episode of the whole season. And then episodes 5 and 6 I liked, but episode 6, I have a frustration a little bit because the ending of episode 6, actually does something I didn't expect, where Riri Williams, Ironheart, meets Mephisto, which is so cool to see Mephisto finally in the MCU, but she makes a deal with him. She makes a deal with the devil in the last episode of this show. And I feel like if Marvel doesn't ever do any follow-up on that, this might catapult Ironheart lower on the list the same way Quantumania shrank down on my MCU ranking, because making your main character of your show make a deal with the devil in your last episode of your series, if you don't ever do anything with that, then why did you even do that? And I'm worried because the fact that Marvel sat on this show for 2 years, and then also just looking at the future of the MCU, I don't see any other opportunity for Ironheart to ever show up again. Because unless in Doomsday Shuri needs extra help and she calls up Riri because they're friends, or quote unquote friends, then I don't know if Ironheart's ever going to get a season 2, or if Ironheart's ever even going to show up again, which is just a shame because this show's ending sets up a really cool idea for a second season. But since Marvel's basically almost forgot Ironheart existed, I doubt we're ever going to see her again. So that makes me hesitant to put this any higher on the list, because there's a very chance that this list might even change if Ironheart never gets a follow-up. This might shrink to be even lower on the list. So as it stands, Ironheart definitely has some good moments. I do really like Parker Robbins as the Hood. I think he's a really fun villain character. I do like Riri for the most part. I really got a lot of fun out of Natalie as a character. I think she's really interesting, and just the whole family message the show's going for is a lot of fun. But as it stands, I can't put this show any higher because it's basically very generic and sometimes bad up until those last 2 episodes. And those last 2 episodes, the reason I like them hinges on the fact that one of them ends with a really cool plot twist that we might never get to see the payoff of. So I can't justify putting this any higher, unfortunately. So sorry, Ironheart. At number 8, I have Captain America: Brave New World. This is another Phase 5 project that I did a whole separate video on reviewing on earlier this year, so I'm going to try to keep this pretty brief. The main things I have about this movie is I do really like the action in it. I think some of the sequences are good, especially that Celestial Island fight where Sam surfs a missile is probably the best part of the movie for me. I love the relationship he has with Falcon, even though that I do feel like they need to do some rewriting of Falcon. I think they need to figure out the relationship he has with Sam. I do like things like Isaiah Bradley, even though he's not in the movie a lot. But the other side of this movie that I don't like is that I think the marketing screwed this movie over by having the whole marketing revolve around Red Hulk being in this movie, but then Red Hulk is only in like 10 minutes of the actual movie, and there's also the unfortunate setup, as anybody who's ever picked up a comic book knows that Captain America can't beat Red Hulk. I don't know what story you're looking at from the comics, but Captain America cannot beat Red Hulk, even with vibranium. Like, he stood no chance. So, you know that going in, so there's basically no stakes in that final battle. And it makes me just want to, like, I wish the marketing was flipped. Tease the leader as the main villain, and then keep Red Hulk a secret for the final product instead of the other way around, because it feels like you promoted the wrong villain, Marvel, personally. But this movie's fine overall. It has also some other problematic things, like I mentioned in my initial review. I think the post-credit scene is not very captivating and is also misguided, and also has got some other things here and there throughout the movie that aren't super great. But overall, I did really like this movie. It has some good moments, but it's definitely not popping up any higher than this on the list, because it does have significant problems that keep it from being anywhere near above a 6 out of 10. At number 7, I have I Am Groot Season 2. And this is the weirdest thing to rank on this list, because, like, I'm talking about full-on, like, movies and full-on mini TV shows, but at the same time, I also have to talk about a season of a collection of five-minute shorts about Baby Groot doing random hijinks. Like, how am I supposed to rank that amongst these other things? As I don't think there's any bad episode of I Am Groot. I think I Am Groot is a really good show. It has some good laughs. It's basically like a quick laugh track for Baby Groot. And it's got some fun moments here and there. Like, there's an episode where Groot finds like an space ice cream truck that I like. And there's also one where he fights a snowman that's kind of interesting. But overall, I don't like, how do you want me to rank a collection of 5 shorts? Like, they're funny, I like them, but there's no overarching story. There's no like villain. There's no like profound story that makes the other projects in Marvel captivating and interesting. So I can't really justify putting this any higher than number 7, but I will take this. This is probably the funniest thing Marvel released during this phase. And I mean, it's better than What If, so I mean, I'll take whatever I can get from Marvel Animation, to be honest. At number 6, I have Agatha All Along. This is another show that I did a whole other review on, so I'm going to keep this brief again. My main thoughts on Agatha All Along is I did really enjoy the show, and I think there's a lot of enjoyable moments. Catherine Hahn is still amazing at playing Agatha Harkness. She's so great. I love the other characters in the show, like William Kaplan. Wiccan was a really cool reveal. I loved Aubrey Plaza as Rio Vidal, or Death. She's such a good villain in the show, and she's so fun. I loved how this TV show, for once, actually felt like a TV show instead of like Marvel taking a movie and chopping it up into 6 parts. This actually felt like they wrote this to be a show, as each episode centered on a different witch's trial and slowly built up to like some really cool reveals in the ending. But this is another show that I think may have a chance to go down or up, because especially sometimes in shows when they do a big twist that makes you re-see the entire show in a different way, rewatching the show doesn't have the same effect. So we'll see in like a couple of years when I rewatch Agatha or something at a later point, we'll see if it changes. But as it stands right now, I really did enjoy Agatha All Along. It's a lot better than a lot of people have been saying it is, so I'd recommend watching it. But if you want to hear my extended thoughts on the show, go watch my initial review on it. But as it stands, Agatha All Along is taking number 6 on the list, and it's a pretty decent show, but there were things this phase that I did think were better. So at number 5, I have Thunderbolts, or The New Avengers, whatever you want to call it. I really enjoyed Thunderbolts, and I want to stress this before we talk about this movie, is the fact that I was opposed to this movie in every aspect for a couple years. Like, when Marvel initially announced this, I thought they had lost their minds, because if you've ever read the comics, you know the Thunderbolts are basically Marvel's Suicide Squad. And Suicide Squad is one of my least favorite movies in the entire DCEU. Both of them, even the ones directed by James Gunn. I did not like the James Gunn one, which I know might be a hot take, but I just didn't like the Suicide Squad character. So when Marvel announces their Suicide Squad, I was worried, oh, I'm going to hate this movie so much because I hate the Suicide Squad. And then they revealed the lineup for this team, which was basically the cast of Black Widow, another MCU movie I didn't like. John Walker, the one of the sub kind of anti-heroes from Falcon Winter Soldier, another show I didn't like. Bucky, who I do like, and then Ghost, the one-off villain from Ant-Man and the Wasp. So pretty standoutly, there was like one character on this team that I did like and wanted to see, which was Bucky, and then later I did really enjoy Elena. So I guess going to this movie, there was two characters I really wanted to see. And then they announced they were also going to have Sentry in this movie, which I was really looking forward to seeing Sentry because they also got a great actor to play him. And then I watched the movie, and it was so much better than I was expecting. Even the trailers made it look this way, as Marvel really took a bunch of characters that I didn't really care about, like at all, and turned them into some of my favorite MCU characters in the most recent years. Of course, Yelena and Bucky are already so great, but they made me enjoy US Agent and Ghost. Two characters I didn't think Marvel could ever get me to love as much as like some of the most famous characters in the MCU, like Daredevil, Punisher, Spider-Man even. Like, that takes a lot of work. You got Red Guardian, who's such a good comic relief character in this movie. And this movie also is one of the few MCU movies that is actually saying something. It's not just a random superhero versus supervillain. It's actually got a full message about abuse and mental health and family that comes really well into the final product. And it's got a lot going for it. Of course, on the flip side, this movie does have some issues that do keep it from any kind of perfect scoring. I do think that they do have some moments, especially in the third act of the movie, kind of loses itself a little bit. Like, for me, a little bit, this movie does kind of present the same problem that Captain America Brave New World had, where it's very clear that this little team of super soldiers, basically, is what most of them are. This little team of super soldiers can't really beat Void or Sentry. They can't really beat him. So, like, there's a little bit of that, like, we have to have a little bit of contrivances to get them to beat the villain, which thankfully it does. It's not too bad. Thankfully, there's not that many contrivances like Captain America was. And there's some moments here and there that I think are a little bit tacked on and maybe are a little unnecessary. But overall, this movie was so much better than I was expecting it to be, and it's more than earned the number 5 spot on this list. And honestly, because this is one of the few Marvel projects that was done post-overhaul, please, Marvel, make more projects like this and less things like Secret Invasion and What If Season 2, please. I'm begging you. At number 4, I have Daredevil Born Again. And say what you want about this show, I really enjoyed Daredevil Born Again. It does definitely have some problems in it. Like I did mention when I did initially review this, my favorite episodes of this entire season was episode 1 and then the last 2 episodes. And keep in mind, those 3 episodes were the episodes that were made after the creative overhaul, where they took the original Daredevil show that they created, which was basically a reboot, and they turned it into a continuation of the original Daredevil show. So those 3 episodes were created post the overhaul, and they're clearly the best because they're emulating that style of the Daredevil show that I've come to love so much, bringing some great characters in. You got Punisher in there, who is so great. I'm so looking forward to that Punisher special. Daredevil, you got Karen in there. And, of course, Kingpin, the shining gem of this show. Such a good villain. So many good moments. I love his new role as mayor. So fun. But this show definitely suffers from its problems. Like I mentioned when I initially reviewed it, this show struggles with its side characters. The side characters are one of my favorite parts of the original Daredevil show. Is every single side character was there with a purpose. None of them were there to fill out scenes. Foggy, Karen, all of the villains. You got Vanessa, the police, the different policemen. You got Melvin. There was so many recurring side characters in Daredevil, and each of them had a purpose. Even full-on episodes revolved around them. You got full episodes for Karen, full episodes for Foggy, that made them feel like real people, and it never felt like they were there in the show because they needed more people to fill out scenes. This show struggles with that, as there's a lot of characters in the show that feel like they have no presence in it. Heather feels like a nothing burger of a character for just to give Matt some kind of one-off love interest. Muse is kind of really badly underutilized, which sucks because Muse is a really cool character. And even some of the a ton of characters, Cherry and McDuffie, kind of just don't really have any interesting presence in the show. So, but this show does look like it's looking up because with all the stuff they've been revealing with Daredevil Born Again Season 2, that seems to look like it's going to be a lot better, especially because it's now post-overhaul. It's going to be hopefully way more in line with the original Daredevil show instead of trying to be this weird choppy where it feels like some things want to be the original Daredevil while some scenes want to be this new reboot thing. So hopefully Season 2 was a lot better. If you want to hear my extended thoughts on Daredevil Born Again, then go watch my initial video, but that's kind of all I really had to say about Daredevil Born Again. I really loved this show, but it does definitely have a lot of problems that keep it from any kind of perfect scores, and so number 4 is really the best I can do for it on this list. At number 3, I have Deadpool and Wolverine. Now that I've had roughly about a year to sit with this movie, it's definitely not my favorite MCU movie anymore, but I definitely don't think it's a bad movie like a lot of people are starting to turn on this movie as. I will admit, however, that I do start to see that the story of this movie is maybe not the strongest. It's not the strongest story ever. It's basically Deadpool gets abducted by the TVA because his universe is dying because his Wolverine died at the end of Logan, so he teams up with another Wolverine from another universe on this big adventure to take down the TVA, where we have a bunch of other random hijinks. And while the story might be simple, I could care less when I'm having so much fun. Even after a year, I'm still loving to rewatch parts of this movie. I'm still laughing at a ton of the jokes, and to be honest, the story was never the strongest part of the Deadpool movies. It was always the characters and the jokes. That was always the strongest part, and this movie nails both of those parts. So many of the jokes land so well, and the characters are so well, giving us great, more like grounded performances for characters like Wolverine and Deadpool, even managing to pull off so well the side character cameos. Elektra, Blade, Gambit, all of them work so well because they don't feel like cameos. They feel like real characters that were put into this movie with a bunch of care and thought, instead of just Marvel being like, all right, who of the Fox like actors do we have a good relationship with and we can act to appear in this movie for like 5 minutes? Not 5 minutes, it's like 10 minutes probably. And it wasn't just like they went on this like, all right, Julia Gardner, we have a good relationship with her. Wesley Snipes, we have a good relationship with him. Oh, Channing Tatum, we have a good relationship with him. It felt like they had a lot of care and love when they put these characters in the movie. And it makes all of their cameos not feel like cameos, but full-fledged characters. There are some other down moments. I don't think Cassandra Nova is the best villain Marvel's ever created. She's all right, and she serves the purpose the movie demands, but she also is not popping up near the top of anyone's MCU villain ranking. But like I said, this movie might not be the greatest MCU ever when it comes to like story and profound themes and stuff, but like I mentioned, I could honestly care less if the story is weak when I'm having this much fun with the movie, and it's to a point where when I'm watching it, I'm not thinking about anything other than just, wow, this movie's good. I really love watching it. So this is where I'm putting Deadpool and Wolverine, but they're at number 3, which I still think is really good considering how other things this phase turned out. Like, at least Marvel could get Deadpool and Wolverine right. Am I right? At number 2, taking over our silver medal, is Loki Season 2. This is another project that I remember being such a huge hater of in the beginning. When Marvel started announcing those early Disney Plus shows they were making for the MCU, it was WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Loki. Which, at first, everyone bat their eyes. They're like, wait, Loki died in Infinity War as a really cool finale to his character arc over the course of the MCU is going from this villain in the first Thor movie to this anti-hero who dies fighting Thanos in Infinity War as this like opening death that shows the movie that we're not messing around, that we will really kill off anybody if we need to for this movie. And then they made the sequel, this show, which they revealed was going to be about the Loki multiversal variant from that escapes during the time heist. And right off the bat, that just seemed like a bad idea. Like, you're going to take a character that we watched grow up over the course of the entire MCU into a really finale death just to have a multiversal variant of him be the lead of a new show. And keep in mind, this multiversal variant came from the 2012's The Avengers. So he was missing like 8 years worth of his character arc that led into Infinity War. So I was like, why would they even do that? And then it did kind of, my worries were filled a little bit when they basically just spent the first episode of the show basically having Loki watch like a clip show of his life in the MCU up until his death, basically just to almost speed run his character development. But from that moment on, the show really used the Loki character to kind of give this deep dive into this like whole multiversal universe of how the TVA is maybe not the best thing for the multiverse, as they keep killing all these innocent lives and sending the rest to basically die off in this void. How the TVA was all manipulated by the hidden man behind the curtain. How Loki is able to break down Sylvie in a way, as both of them are kind of the exact same character. And it led to this really cool finale that ended so fun. And Loki Season 2, in my opinion, was so much better than Season 1, as not only does it keep up that really profound story of telling a really cool story about Loki as a character, eventually leading to that huge sacrifice at the end where Loki becomes the god of stories. And it tells a so profound story. Even characters like Sylvie and Mobius get full arcs, which is so fun. And the other thing that I commend this show for is that they did a really good job with their side characters this season. B-15 and Casey were two characters in the first season of Loki that I didn't have any attachment to at all, and I just felt like they were random window dressing to fill out the scenes at the TVA. Like, we needed a strict hunter to be hunting Loki, and then a panelist, like a TVA young panelist that Loki can intimidate. But this season turns them into so much more like prominent characters, and you really get to feel the like friendship Loki's built with both of them. And then you also add Ouroboros to the season, who's such a good comic relief character. I loved him in almost every scene he was in. And surprisingly, I even liked Victor Timely. I was not expecting to like him, especially after the news of Jonathan Majors' firing. But I still liked his story, and I think this season also did a good job of kind of leaving the door open of, in a way, finishing the arc of Victor Timely. So it kind of allowed them to pivot to Doctor Doom and kind of leave Kang behind. So I really loved Loki Season 2, and it definitely is one of the best things Marvel produced this phase, and it's only beaten by one project that I'm pretty sure most of you have been able to figure out which one it is. At number 1, with honestly no competition, is, for how much I like Loki Season 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine and all those other things I mentioned, like Daredevil and Thunderbolts, there's only one MCU project that in this entire phase that I would actually consider a flawless masterpiece. And that is, of course, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This movie is everything I love about the previous 3 phases of the MCU in the Infinity Saga, and it's captured so perfectly. James Gunn ends the Guardians trilogy with such an emotional send-off to these characters, to a point where if the Guardians do never end up showing up again in the MCU, I honestly would not be super mad, because this movie is such an emotional send-off. One reason I love in this movie is Rocket's story. Rocket, up to this point in the MCU, has kind of been a hit-or-miss character, as he's been more or less the comic relief of the 2 previous Guardians movies and a little bit more in Infinity War. But then Endgame started to break him down and kind of reveal this emotional backstory of the Guardians are the only family Rocket's ever had, and that's kind of what's pushing him to try to get them back. And then Guardians 3 opens the floodgates to reveal such a tragic backstory for this character, and it makes him now one of my favorite MCU characters. I love Rocket Raccoon after this movie. In fact, that scene where he finally says his name, Rocket Raccoon, such a good moment in the movie, and so good. All the characters in the movie are great. I was expect it. It does have some weird moments. Like I wasn't expecting to like Gamora because it's like it's the 2014 variant of Gamora from Endgame. But she's fine for what the movie needs. Peter Quill has some ups and downs for the movie, but I do still really enjoy him. I love pretty much. I love this movie is pretty much perfect across the board, and especially the villain. The High Evolutionary is such a well done villain, played by a great actor, giving us such a phenomenal performance to the point where you feel why you're supposed to hate this guy, but you also can understand some of the places he's coming from, which I think is what makes him so enjoyable. Guardians Volume 3 is the only project in Phase 5, sorry, that I can consider perfect, as I don't think there's a single thing about this movie I dislike, whereas apart to things like now Deadpool and Wolverine and Loki Season 2, I do start to see some of the flaws in those things, but nonetheless, this movie is everything I love about the previous two Guardians movies, and it's the perfect send-off that we needed to the Guardians trilogy as a whole, and it's by far my favorite project to release during Phase 5 of the MCU. So there you guys have it, my ranking for all 15 projects that released during the run of Phase 5 of the MCU. And to put it as an overall lens on the MCU as a whole, this phase was definitely a lot better than Phase 4 in project consistency, as there's a lot more projects in this phase that I liked rather than disliked. But there also is the other issue that also Phase 4 struggled with, is that the overarching story is kind of still getting lost. Like, funny enough, of this phase of the MCU, Phase 5, only 3 projects in the whole thing dealt with the multiverse. That was Loki Season 2, Deadpool and Wolverine, and What If. Kind of rolling Season 2 and Season 3 into one here. I guess technically you could count I Am Groot if you want to count the Watcher's cameo in that final episode of I Am Groot. But as it stands, of the 15 projects this season, technically only 4 have something to do with the multiverse, which I think is rough considering by this point in the MCU, for instance, back in the Infinity Saga, by the middle phase of the Infinity Saga, that being Phase 2, we knew 4 of the 5 Infinity Stones, and we knew Thanos was the one after them. So by this time in the Infinity Saga, we only had 2 more Infinity Stones introduced before we were technically ready for Infinity War. So Marvel still made that last phase fun by introducing new characters that made the story impactful and made Infinity War be such an emotional movie, having great moments with Spider-Man and Black Panther that they released in the end phase. So I am a little worried. Still, I've mentioned this a couple times, I am still a little worried for Phase 6 and the ending of the Multiverse Saga, because we've gotten to that point where we know very little about the multiverse. In fact, we haven't even met Doctor Doom yet, so hopefully that happens in Fantastic Four so we can start to build hype around that character. But as of right now, I am still a little worried for the Multiverse Saga, as we kind of know very little still about the multiverse as a whole, and the multiverse still is kind of operating under this lens where every other project seems to handle the multiverse differently, like they haven't picked a clear lane for what they want the multiverse to be yet. But I still think this phase was a huge step in the right direction, especially that some of these back-ended projects at the end of the phase, some of them were done post the creative overhaul, and now moving into Phase 6, all of those products are post-overhaul. And honestly, a lot of them look like they're going to be really good. The things we've been hearing about Fantastic Four looks like it's going to be great. And the things we've been hearing about things like Spider-Man 4 and Punisher, the Punisher special, look like they're going to be so good movies and shows. There's even Daredevil Born Again Season 2 looks like going to be good. Even, I didn't count them in this list because I wasn't sure if they count for MCU properties, but Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man looks like it's going to be a lot. Season 2 looks like it's going to be fun. X-Men 97 Season 2 looks like it's going to be good. So I think the future for the MCU does look really bright. And this phase shows that they are still capable of making those really top tier projects. It just unfortunately comes at the cost of still having some really, really bad ones. But if we get a movie like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 for every Secret Invasion, I think the MCU can rebuild its trust and eventually evolve back into the franchise we all want to see, especially once we finally get out of this multiverse saga. We can finally focus on the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, and Spider-Man, and hopefully we can bring those characters back into the limelight of the MCU and undo all the damage Fox did to them. Fox and Sony have done to them. So I still think the MCU has a really bright future, and Phase 5, while having some pretty bad moments, still makes up for it with a lot of really good ones. And you might have even noticed in the list, a lot of the movies I put, and a lot of the projects I put in the top 10 or in the top 5 are actually projects from the 2025 and 2024. So there's definitely been a lot more better things in this recent year. So without further ado, thank you guys all very much for watching this video, and I want to know, what is your ranking for the 15 projects that released during Phase 5 of the MCU? And if that's just a little too hard for you, go ahead and just tell me what your top 3 are and what your bottom 3 are. But without further ado, thank you guys all very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys!